What's up? What's up? What's up? Happy Monday night. It's Rob with the Nocturnal Knockout back in your life on a Monday evening. This time, digesting Monday Night Raw from January 20th, 2025. What is up, everyone? There was a lot to digest from tonight's edition of Monday Night Raw. Monday Night Raw had a lot of obstacles, not necessarily obstacles. I would say let's maybe clarify that. Let's call them objectives. There was a lot of things to get done on this night. They had to promote a Saturday night's main event. They had to use a lot of real estate on this show to promote that show. They had to build towards one of their biggest pay-per-views of the year, the Royal Rumble. They'd have several segments that would lead to matches and entrance, all that good stuff that we've all come to love from the Royal Rumble. They're also just trying to both acknowledge and survive a night with some pretty tough competition. A night where a lot of the country is focused on politics, and a night where a lot of the country is watching college football. And quite frankly, the wrestling on a holiday might be a little less of a priority on this evening. But that doesn't mean we didn't have an active show. That doesn't mean we didn't have a show that had a ton of development, and we're going to break it down tonight. We're going to go by it segment by segment, and we're going to point out a few things. We're going to look at everything that happened with Sami Zayn on this evening and what that sets him up for going into the Rumble. We're going to examine what CM Punk revealed in his promo. Not only did CM Punk pretty wisely position himself on the other side of Hogan, he pointed out a severe flaw in his career, something that has held him back for many years. We're also going to discuss champions and who deserves them. Of course, we did get some development towards Saturday night's main event, and this is the last time I'm going to talk to you guys before then. So we might as well make some predictions for Saturday night's main event. And if you want to make predictions, do what E just did right in there and go ahead and hit up the chat. What's up, Azan? Long time no talk. I'm not really in asylum. Yeah. The yeeting was going on for a while with Michael Cole. That was a very long entrance. Sure was. So we kicked off the night, actually. I thought that maybe that's how we would stretch out the show. And for the second week in a row, we get this nice tidy 2.5 hour Raw, which, let's just face it, it still helps things flow. No Corey Graves talk. Well, he wasn't on this show. We were, of course, spared. Maybe that was the big news. We were spared of Pat McAfee because of the college football national championship game, which I believe, spoilers, Ohio State looks like they were winning or going to win. And then we'll reshuffle college football into next year. Bit of a football hangover right now, right? It was nice to get back into wrestling. I actually didn't have the appetite for football today after so much football this weekend. But I mean, I'm ready for championship weekend. I'm also ready for Saturday night's main event and the Royal Rumble because those shows lots and lots of promo on this night. So let's go ahead. And before we break it down, I got to tell you that, as I mentioned, I am Rob. This is the Nocturnal Knockout, which is becoming your Rob Post show right here on the One True Sport YouTube channel. And we are a Brass Ring Media podcast. And of course, you could follow all the great Brasserie Media content, just go ahead and type it into your Google machine. You can follow us on Patreon, Substack, and of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Only 3 matches for the Rumble so far. You don't need a ton for that show, though. At least that's always the benefit of that show. Now, Raw tonight came to us from Dallas, Texas. A hot crowd in Dallas, despite some of the distractions going on, and a crowd that was, I think, fairly predictable as far as who the promotion wanted to be cheered and to be booed. We got an opening, though, of seeing from earlier in the day that Nia Jax had ambushed Rhea Ripley earlier in the day, and you just knew that, of course, that was gonna pay off later. And as I mentioned, thanks to the college football championship game, we ended up getting a break from Pat McAfee on commentary, but we don't get any Corey Graves. No. Of course, he's taking his little time out. And we had Michael Cole and Wade Barrett, which I got to say, pretty good combo. I'll take Barrett over McAfee or Graves any day, but I got a flashback on this show. This show triggered something in me that I hadn't experienced in a long time. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So we opened the show with the promo. We opened the show with the Jey Uso promo. And Jey opened the show with a really, really long entrance. As you mentioned, everyone's getting into it. Everyone's doing the yeets. It went. I don't know if it went to a commercial, but it kind of feels like it did. I don't know. It probably did. But very, very quickly, we got a interruption by Gunther. And Gunther, as Azan alludes to, kind of speaks some facts in there, depending on your perspective. He calls out Jey as a complete dork and a company mascot and a useful idiot. He points out the fact that Jay's just there, to be of service to other people. Basically, he's a setup guy. Now, Jey did have some retorts, like pointing out that he's main evented WrestleMania, beating Jey, and Gunther hasn't. I mean, a bit of semantics if you have the tag team main event on night 1 of a 2-day WrestleMania. Yeah, whatever. But that led to like an assault by Gunther. And ultimately, Jey got the better of him in the physical exchange, had the crowd on his side. They did the whole thing. And this is the build up to the big match on Saturday night where we get Jey versus Gunther for the title. Now, we're going to preview the show later with predictions, but you got to wonder, does anybody in the world give Jey a chance here? I'd be inclined not to, but you do have to consider the fact that a title on Jey brings titles back into bloodline type of storylines. Something I don't think you can ever really discount. But is it time? Are you going to take the title off of Gunther that quickly? Whatever happens with the title, it has a direct effect on WrestleMania this time of year. So you can't just be so flippant about it. Backstage, the New Day actually ended up meeting JBL. They asked JBL to be an acolyte for them. And that led into JBL being the guest commentator for Ray versus Kofi. So now I talked earlier that it was great that we were spared Pat McAfee, and I will never complain about being spared Pat McAfee. But for the love of God, I did not want to be reminded of how awful the time period was where JBL was on commentary. There's been a lot of bad eras of commentary over the last 20 years of Monday Night Raw, post JR and the King. There's been a lot of bad eras of commentary, and some of the worst were generally headed by JBL yelling "Mago, Mago, Mago" 1,000 times. So we don't want to take back to that. Ray's been a jobber over the years. Well, it was Ray who retired JBL. So I was wondering if they were going to go into that. Now, before this match, I should say, Bayley announced that she's back on Raw. I guess that's a result of the transfer portal. And she's interrupted by initially an unmiked Nia Jax that turns into a mic'd Nia Jax. One thing I appreciated about this appearance, and maybe on Azan's point here, is he said JBL is kind of fun. At least JBL was a heel. Now, he's being kind of cool to the New Day. Like he's babyface there because there's no way to not be cool in comparison to the New Day right now on the show. But in terms of Rey Mysterio, calling him a bad father, kind of alluding to the fact that he retired him, actually wasn't in Dallas, but was in Texas. But then I thought what was great on commentary, a little touch, is JBL declared that, or Michael Cole declared that JBL was a locker room leader. And that's what he was known for, which not untrue. JBL is known for being a locker room leader. Don't know what we're talking about? Look it up, kids. It's in there. But yeah, that was a good touch. At one point, Xavier Woods and his highlighter pants were eliminated. This guy's pants were super, super bright. And then Ray gets the win before the skirmish starts. So you might have alluded to, you think Ray's been a jobber over these years? I wouldn't say so. And Ray got the win on this night over Kofi. JBL is in the Rumble. Is that official? I hope not. I mean, for no other reason, like, then what's been advertised for the Rumble, and I think they're doing this very strategically, is so top guy heavy. It's so guys that can win, and now they're putting that even into the storylines here. Now, Chad Gable also did make note that he's enlisted a lucha expert to help deal with all his lucha issues. He's going to take the help of Dominic Mysterio. And that led to Sammy walking out and a Sammy promo, and one of what was, I think, the cornerstone segments and storylines of the night. So Sammy came out there and he declares for the Royal Rumble. He notes that he's a top guy, just like all the top guys that have already declared for the Rumble. But he notes that the difference is that unlike those other top guys like Punk and Cena and Roman, he doesn't have a title. They do. And he notes that he's okay with it, that he's at peace with his career, but darn it, he wants a title. And then KO interrupts. KO points out that they can main event WrestleMania this year together for the big title. And KO says he's got Sammy's back. Like he knows Sammy will have it his. So they end this with Sammy having a lot of things to consider. Does he conspire with his all-time frenemy to win the Rumble and have KO defeat Cody and go into main event WrestleMania? Not a chance in hell that happens, but interesting enough storyline. Hold on to that thought, Azan, because we're going to talk about that. Now, a few things here. I think this was a pretty good promo by Sammy in the promo section of it before he was cut off. And some interesting things by KO. KO's character right now in this year is really expanding now in this post-Roman bloodline era. And he has all these little tentacles in all of these different things, which is usually the best use of Kevin Owens over the years. And now, along with his weird game with the 2 titles that he's doing with Cody, he's taken Randy out for a long time, playing these little mind games with Sami Zayn and bringing in little shades of the bloodline and what will happen there. And I think we got 2 questions out of this segment. Is, does Sammy take any of this bait? And what does that lead to for Sammy at WrestleMania? Because we've talked a lot about the main events of WrestleMania and the big matches that they're probably going to do. Have we talked about what Kevin and Sammy are going to be doing? I think Sammy was a much lower priority, and he may only be a concern going into the Rumble. But Kevin has been a much larger concern, at least at this time of year. Now, he tends to peak at the Royal Rumble. That's what he's been used for over the course of like the last half of a decade. And that may be the case again. We'll see. But Azan noted that he felt that Sammy will never be champ in WWE. Now, I thought that was really interesting because they played on that tonight. And if you look at that lineup of the Royal Rumble, the stacked Royal Rumble lineup, tons of former champs. And it speaks to a few things and some things that are maybe a little bit different about modern WWE that weren't the case a couple of years ago. Sami Zayn is a holdover from an era where almost everybody got a world title at some point. I would say this probably started towards the end of the Attitude Era, but even in the Attitude Era, if you think about it, all of the top guys in the Attitude Era at one point won the title. And that's an even bigger deal if you really think about it, because there was only one title, one show to win it on back then. But of course, Austin won the titles. Of course, Rock won the title. Hell, Vince won the title. Cripps won the title. Mick Foley, who could have been the guy that never won the title, he also won the title. Even if it was for only one night, Kane won the title. Of course, Undertaker won the title. Big Show won the title. As you can see in the Attitude Era, maybe it only went to a few guys, but it went to all the top guys that would be considered main event. If you look back to that time period, who is it that didn't win a title? It's guys like Billy Gunn. Guys that were never really in a position to do so. Maybe Ken Shamrock. You fast forward it as we go through the Ruthless Aggression Era, pretty much all those guys had titles too, up to and including guys you never thought would have titles, like the Benoits and the Guerreros. And you get fully into the Ruthless Aggression Era, and everybody has a title. Despite Cena having like his 16 titles, it's because he loses those titles to a lot of different guys. And as history goes down, everyone from that era ended up with a title. Obviously, the big guys like Edge and Batista had titles. Orton had titles. Jeff Hardy won titles. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Phil, talk about another Phil. If you look back, heck, even The Miz won a title. Technically, Dolph Ziggler won a title. Eventually, Cody won a title. So that whole OVW era, even into the Ruthless Aggression era, most of them won a title. But that is where this distinction can kind of lie, because one of the things that happened way back at WrestleMania, was it 35, when Kofi Mania was happening, was Kofi was like the last guy from his generation of wrestlers that hadn't won a title. And I think that is mostly still true. But if you fast forward it, I think in the modern era, it hasn't been as big of a deal. But can they? Because you've had a lot longer title runs, especially with guys like Roman Reigns on top for a really long time. And in the Triple H just tends to book longer title runs, even though a lot of guys have held titles. So I think that trend may adjust back, where having a title is a more elusive thing. The reason why I say all of this is to bring up the fact that Sami Zayn is one of the few guys that can go down as a guy who could have won a title, who was super over, maybe you can say, but never did. And he still existed in an era pre-Bloodline that everybody got a title. That opening, I think, has shrunk a little bit. I don't think Cena actually wins a title before this is all said and done. So now there's a handful of guys that realistically could have won a title in the era where everybody got a title. And I actually went through the roster really quick during Raw to point out some of these guys. Now, some of these guys obviously never had a legit shot and never will win a title. I mean, technically Titus O'Neil is still on the roster, but Bo Dallas never really had a good look at it. Gallows and Anderson were never really singles people. But there's some other people to point out, and let's examine if they ever should win a major title. Someone that stands out to me right away, and someone who this storyline is running concurrent with, is a guy like Xavier Woods, which, if you compare something like the Shield and the New Day, Xavier Woods is the one guy of all 6 of them that never had the major singles title. And unlike a lot of guys that you look at that never held the title, there was never really the moment for Xavier to hold a title. So there's never really been him in a position to do so. It's more about holding smaller championships with him. In fact, it's kind of like acknowledge that he's more of an undercard wrestler. Otis is on my list, Phil, and that's interesting because maybe there was a chance for Otis to win a title. Obviously, he was right there in the Money in the Bank right before the Bloodline even came to be, but I don't think he ever had a realistic look at it. The most over he ever was in a mid-card storyline, and even that was only going to take him so far. Another one that's interesting that's still on the roster that, like you thought would have happened, is Shinsuke Nakamura. It seemed when Shinsuke Nakamura came in 2016 that no doubt he would have had a title. Everyone else who came around him in those couple of year period pretty much got multiple title runs. He's the one guy that didn't, and yet he's still on TV and stayed as one of the more consistent guys. At least Finn Balor got a title for one night. If they were ever going to do it, it would have been with the match with AJ, which probably could have been the moment, but they didn't capitalize on it. And looking back, I don't know if that was the right or wrong decision. But him not turning into a top guy is something that I don't think anyone saw at the time. Carlito is on that list, and honestly, there was a time when we probably thought Carlito was gonna be a champion, and it was absolutely the right decision for him never, ever, ever to be the champion. Apollo Crews is a guy that maybe you could have seen get a look, but he was just never close enough. The closest Apollo Crews maybe ever got was during the pandemic when everyone is out. Now, a guy who's technically still around that never got a title is R-Truth. The closest R-Truth ever came to getting a title was maybe the pay-per-view right before Money in the Bank when he actually got a title shot with John Cena, but that was, even then, was so super unserious. Andrade never really matured into a main eventer in the Vince era, so I couldn't have seen it for him. Now, some other guys that are interesting to look at is a guy like Johnny Gargano, because he was so much in the mold of a Daniel Bryan that you could have seen a time where maybe a groundswell would have picked up for him, and maybe there would have been a situation where he could have been put into a main event scenario, but it never happened, and I don't think it should happen. I think he should go down as a tag wrestler and be in the spot he's in. Chad Gable's another interesting one that the potential was definitely there, but there's never been a time where you've looked at it and maybe the time is for him to main event. It would have to have been much closer to him coming out of NXT, and that was never going to be the case. And at this point, they shouldn't do it. Jey Uso might be considered on that list, but Jey Uso's not a guy that's been a disappointment as a single for years and years, has he? He's only had a singles career for a very short time. And maybe early on you could have put the title on him and forsaken this whole bloodline thing, but I don't think so. And then that leaves us with Sami Zayn, who's been close a couple of times. But even when the best time to do it was maybe the match he had in his hometown, everyone knew that it really wasn't the right move. So if it was going to happen for Sami, it probably should have happened a lot earlier, but they wasted so much time with Sami and the Artist Collective and doing all that other stuff that there was never really a good time. So if you look at that list, I think Sami's the only one that maybe you could say could have a title and they could make a good enough storyline out of it. But would you really want a retread of a Kofi or a Daniel Bryan or any of those type of storylines? Maybe you wouldn't get it if Sami was that guy, because Sami's a different type of character. He has, like he said tonight, established himself as like a main event guy. But would you actually have the urge to see him go through and win a championship? Would you have the stomach for that? I don't know. Sheamus got some promo time. He talked about his obsession with the IC title. Let out a "Let's Go Irish" for the night. Didn't end up being lucky, but he got interrupted by Braun Breaker. They got their match coming up. We'll talk about it later. That was hour one of Raw. barely talked about the Ray match. You had the promo from Sammy, I think, was the big development. You had the opening promo kind of setting up the match at Saturday night's main event, but even within the context we talked about a couple weeks ago, that title and that side of things just feels so much lesser. In the order of things, it's not even like Cody's belt feels like the number one thing in the company right now, and Gunther's belt is significantly lower than that. We did, though, leading into hour two, which was going to start with the Bayley and Nia Jax match, we did get a short tribute to Bob Uecker, which is absolutely appropriate. Shout out to Bob Uecker. Rest in peace. What are the old time greats? As Bayley and Nia were starting this match, though, I had huge expectations for this thing because there's been so much discourse over, whose fault it was for that really boring segment to start off the women's war game match this year. I was glad they were able to reconcile that. Roxanne and Bayley actually get into a little tiff on the side. Roxanne was there in the crowd. Obviously, Bayley's been coming up at NXT, a lot going on with NXT the last couple of days. And Nia wins, but she's interrupted by Rhea and gets a lot of energy here. Rhea challenges Nia for Saturday night's main event, so adds another match to there. Backstage, Gable gets passed a note from Dom. And we get some little bit of just Judgment Day chatting. I think Dom announces he's going to replace Finn. That seems to be all of where they're going. I don't care about what's going on with the Judgment Day anymore. I'm over it. Last week was the end of it. Let's figure things out, people. Sammy came out there though to thank Seth as he ran into, of course, everything building to the big main event between Seth Rollins and Drew McIntyre. Sheamus beats Braun, says he. Sheamus versus Cena at Elimination Chamber. Cena versus Braun at Mania. Anyone can win that match. You have Cena competing for a second tier title at WrestleMania. Interesting. Ginger ale of the night. No specific ginger ale. We are sponsored by. Dom versus Penta would be cool. Penta versus pretty much anyone would be cool, including Penta versus Pete Dunne, which was pretty cool on this night. And Penta wins with the Penta driver. I was unsure about it last week, but I think I like what they're doing with Penta. This is what they're going to do. I'm okay with them taking a little bit to put him into a storyline. I think you want to showcase Penta. He's a guy whose moveset and those kind of things, his charisma. I know Rey Fenix is the better wrestler, maybe has the cooler moves, but the overall charisma he presents, you want to present that and you want to showcase that. And maybe you don't want that to get bogged down necessarily in feuds. Maybe there was some discourse last week if you want to do 50-50 matches and this and that, but I don't think that's what they're doing here. You're having him have matches where he's, adapting to these guys who are losers, but not necessarily jobbers. Split your hairs there on what Pete Dunne and Gable count as, but guys who you can at least get a showcase out of that aren't exactly squashes. And these are essentially serving as glorified squashes, which I don't think is a bad idea, as long as it doesn't take him like an hour each week to barely beat all these guys, which this week was not the case. I assume at some point we'll get Rey versus Penta for sure. And we know if a heel Penta would be really good, but I mean, he's very, very much embraced right now. That 2 weeks of Penta, I gotta say, so far so good. We'll see if he gets kind of a showcase in the Royal Rumble. I think that would be pretty cool, and that would be maybe have him eliminate someone big. He's a guy that I think he should strike while you've got it now and figure out something for him to do. Don't do the AEW thing and bring someone with the hype, showcase them, and then we put him on the shelf, we forget about him, and whatever happens. Like, let's not do that with our acquisitions whenever they start coming in this direction. So we get a Logan Paul promo where he declares himself the GOAT. The preset Logan Paul promo. But he does declare he's going to be on Raw next week. We also note that Cody, the American Nightmare, will be on Raw next week. Roman Reigns will be on Raw next week. If I don't collapse, I will be on here after Raw next week. So they're setting up the go home edition of Raw, which also coincides with some other releases of other big things going on in the company, as one of the bigger editions of Monday Night Raw. The go home, going, your post Saturday night's main event, but going home into the Royal Rumble. They're loaded up that Raw. Sometimes that Raw gets swallowed up into a showcase Raw. This year was January 6th that ended up doing that. So Raw had a couple of weeks to breathe and get some promo legit into the Royal Rumble. All of a sudden, Cult of Personality was blaring over the loudspeakers, and you knew we were getting a CM Punk promo. He was asked a tough question here, though. She asked him, what says you're going to win the Royal Rumble, Punk? You haven't won in the past. It's an event you haven't won. One of the few things in your career that you haven't done. And Punk says history. History is the reason why he will win the Rumble this year. He also says he's going to kill Hulkamania, which suddenly he became the most over person in the history of wrestling. Crazy how times have changed on that. Now, that is funny. Obviously, that's a nod to the booze that Hogan got a couple of weeks ago. And, funny day for that in general. And it's an easy win, I think, for Punk. And one that I don't begrudge him for taking, by the way. I just think it's a good win. And it's funny, though, because it's gonna be a talking point. It's gonna be a takeaway. Hogan's gonna have a dumb response. Someone's gonna pick this up on like the Culture Warrior mantle. There'll be Reddit posts dedicated to this. That's how stupid it's gonna be. And Punk can trigger that in people. I think Punk's very good at that. Remember what he did to Drake Wuertz a couple like. What's up, Super Kick? I'm glad you're enjoying it, man. So now Punk and remember Punk and Hogan, they have a history. I bet you if I type in Punk and Hogan into X right now, it won't come up. But if you recall, they have a Twitter history that goes back a long time. I want to say it goes back to 2014 and the Blackhawks being in the Stanley Cup. And something of like Hogan calling him a quitter. Does that sound right? And then like Punk just laid into. I should have pulled this tweet up. Anyway, I will say about a decade ago, they had a fun little interaction. If you guys will, oh yeah, see, agree. So I really went into to X myself, and that's a funny sentence. And everything's. I mean, I don't know how Hogan feels. Like, you would think this would be a fun day for Hogan. Generally, things seem to be going his way, and then he was shouted out on Monday Night Raw. But I want to okay, CM Punk, Hogan tweet 2014, or I'm delusional and this never happened. Okay, here it is. Let me pull up the TMZ story. This is how you know I'm doing hardcore journalism here. Oh, that was another that Punk told that Hogan told him to come back. Anyway, they've had their feuds and they've had their words in the past. This will endure Punk to some. It'll make some hate Punk. It is, though, very odd and brand, and I think it's a good lane to exist in. And if you are shocked by the politics or any of that of Punk, you have not been paying attention. So I would say if that's something that shocks you, just get with the program. But Punk brought up something that I thought was far more profound than his burial of Hulk Hogan. No, I did not see that. I haven't been paying attention too much to that stuff. I've just been following the actual news, like the executive orders. I haven't been following too much inauguration stuff. But a real inconvenience of CM Punk's career was pointed out. Now, CM Punk has made a brand out of not main eventing WrestleMania. It's become a personal mission for him, right? He cited it when he left the company back in 2014 as like that goal that he needed to accomplish, that one monkey he needed to get off his back. And he wants to really main event WrestleMania, not have the title on undercard match, no, like close out WrestleMania, main event, the main event of WrestleMania, the one thing he hasn't done. And now it's being used in storylines and it's a quest he's on. But as was pointed out tonight, his lack of success at WrestleMania is because he's had a lack of success at the Royal Rumble. If you think about it, it's actually pretty interesting. Like, that's where CM Punk needs to get it together. He's not a WrestleMania loser. He's a Royal Rumble loser, so he's never in the showcase at WrestleMania. He does fine at WrestleMania. He's terrible at the Royal Rumble. That's what CM Punk needs to focus on. Let's look at like what CM Punk's done at the Royal Rumble in the past. In 2007, he was eliminated by the Great Khali. Remember, he was part of the very early ECW originals and all of that stuff was going on. But he did help like 14 other ECW originals eliminate Big Daddy V. So that was important. In 2008, he was eliminated by Chavo, but at least he got Chuck Palumbo out of there. Which, imagine if Chuck Palumbo wins the Royal Rumble in 2008 and he made events with like John Cena or Randy Orton. That was like every week, I think Punk was losing to Chavo in like the Gulf of Mexico or something like that. And poor John Morrison was around there. All because of what Benoit did. That had a lot of impact there. Big Show took him out in 2009, but at least he got to take out William Regal, which not a great time to take out William Regal earlier in 2008 when William Regal was super, super hot. That might have been the time, but all that fell apart as that year went on. Punk stole the show in the 2010 Rumble. You guys remember that one where he's the straight edge savior guy already, and he's just doing the sermon all the time. That was awesome. That was cool. And that started this trend of Punk kind of like shining in the Rumble just a little bit, because he did it again in 2011 where him and the Nexus were taking everyone out. He lasted forever in the 40-man Rumble. He was like the main part of the first part of it, and then he got eliminated. But that was like 2011. That was 2011. What a weird thing. That was 2011 before he had dropped the pipe bomb. It's that weird. That's even pre-Rock 2011. That is weird. Miz is the champion. Just wrestling is in such a doldrums at the Royal Rumble in 2011. You got a 40-man Royal Rumble that Alberto Del Rio wins. What a time to be alive. Jeez. In 2012, he had a match with Dolph Ziggler because he had the title. Now, again, him having the title didn't help him because he had the title. He had the main title on Raw. 2012 didn't matter because Cena and Rock were going to main event. And the hostility just grew in Punk. And then in 2013, he gets the main event, the Royal Rumble, but the Rock's arms were long enough to box with him. And he loses to The Rock, which is a pretty underrated match, but it started his 3 pay-per-view losing streak after he was the champion that never made evented until like that show. So Punk needs to focus from a kayfabe perspective on the Royal Rumble. This is the show that he does not get it done at. This is where he should be obsessed with. And now, though, in all seriousness, you do have 2 guys, I think, that have laid out their big journeys. I don't think like Cena's journey. Cena's just a name in this Rumble. I don't think his presence is as important as I think some of you guys think it is. I think it's ego. I think it's the Romans and the Punks and the McIntyres and those are the people that matter. Does Hogan show up and eliminate Punk or just make a WrestleMania appearance? Like, I think we don't see Hogan for a couple of months. Maybe I think he gets a hey, it's Hogan, it's a legend. Their WrestleMania quick thing. I don't think he's a part of things just because of the way he was received. Now, who knows how the next couple of months go, and we will see. But what do you guys think of Punk's promo here? Super babyface, super over, nothing controversial, like not even targeting any one individual, a little bit of Cena, maybe just sort of everyone. I think he's the linchpin here. Oh, and I almost forgot. Last year, he got injured for many months after not winning the Royal Rumble, but at least he was like a big part of it. All right. From the Punk promo, we got a little bit of fallout. Damage Control, consisting of Io Sky and Dakota versus the PFC, Zoe Stark and Shayna. This was actually pretty fun. The crowd got really into it. At the end, Zoe Stark, or excuse me, there was a great drop kick that was hit earlier, and then by Zoe, and then Io Sky had a cool moonsault at the end, and the crowd was super into it. Damage Control getting the pin here. And just like that, we found out ourselves in hour 3 of Raw. It's going quick. And to that point, there had only been a couple of matches. But the show was flowing with a decent pace. I think of the 3 weeks we've seen on Netflix, this was the most decently paced one. It felt like the least amount of time of them doing nothing. It felt a little bit tighter than I felt the last 2 weeks shows I felt, even though like on here, you guys really enjoyed last week's show in general. But there we get the main event with Seth Rollins and Drew McIntyre. This thing went a good 30 or so minutes. I can't believe it though. Breaking news. Huge. Seth Rollins won a match that was advertised. I know it's blowing my mind too. He got the quick leverage pin, so we know WWE leverage pins are kind of non-canon. They don't really count. But you get all this skirmish afterwards. No CM Punk involvement as you had in the past, but you did have Sami Zayn come out there with the inverted haluva kick to Seth Rollins. Raw basically went off the air with Sami holding up Seth telling him, I didn't mean to do it. Then we go off and now we're going to spend the next couple of weeks questioning the motives of Sami Zayn, which is one of the main stories. The only really storyline I would say in that way, going into the Rumble, other than I just need to win it. So, can we trust Sami? What's going to happen? So I think all of those storylines, though, are very, very important in terms of how the Rumble will be structured and ordered. Who's going to help who, when, and where? Is Cody going to main event? I don't think so. I think the Rumble match will main event. So how all those things are situated, the sequential order, it's going to be important. That was Monday Night Raw. What'd you guys think? I thought it was a nice and tidy Raw with some really good matches. I didn't even know that main event between Seth and Drew was very, very good. It was slow, as a lot of these Drew main events are, but not in a bore you way. The last 2 weeks, I thought the Raw main event has had some slow parts to it, but eventually picked up to a pretty nice crescendo. They're putting on really good main events in this Netflix era. And again, essentially a normal edition of Raw, except for a little bit shorter than we were used to before. Overall, I would give this actually, of the 3 Raws that have been on Netflix, I think this has been the best one they've done so far. They have a big one coming up next week, and we'll be here to talk about it. Let's catch up on the old Twitter. See See what news has broke. Other than Buckeyes are national champions, good for them. Yeah, back-to-back years, Michigan and Ohio State champions. Yeah, so let's break down what we have so far on Saturday, and then we'll take a early look at the Royal Rumble field. Let's see if we think there's going to be any changing of titles. Let's make this unofficially our really quick and brief, as we know the card right now. Saturday night's main event preview for the San Antonio edition of Saturday night's main event. Let's see here. Look at that. All right. So, as of right now, there are 4 matches announced. There's also the dreaded, because we got their contract signing between Kevin Owens and Cody Rhodes, moderated, of course, by San Antonio's own Shawn Michaels. Which, I mean, who cares that Shawn Michaels is moderating this thing? Are we supposed to believe that Shawn Michaels is going to keep order, or that he's going to cause chaos? Like the Shawn Michaels we saw in Saudi Arabia a couple of years ago, that's the guy we're supposed to be worried about. That's the guy that's going to lay down the law. That's the sheriff there. Oh, I think Joe Hendry for sure. There's going to be tons of TNA involvement. Joe Hendry, I think, for sure makes an appearance. It's hard to say because so much of the top half of the Rumble is these established guys. How much of the rest of the card or the rest of the field is going to fill out with just regular WWE under and mid card guys versus surprises? We'll talk full predictions and all that though next week on our Go Home show. But we had a title match, I guess, made official this week with Rhea and Nia for the women's world title recently on the January 6th edition of Raw. Rhea Ripley winning this title. Nia Jax, of course, was cashed in on by Tiffany Stratton. There is no chance that Rhea Ripley does not have the title going into WrestleMania. This will be an all right match that Rhea Ripley will get a giant pop in. Next up, Braun Strowman and Jacob Fatu. It's time to kind of get moving on Jacob Fatu, as they are maybe pivoting away from Solo Sikoa. It's time for Jacob Fatu to take the reins and him to be the focus of wherever that segment of the bloodline leads you. And Braun Strowman is the perfect guy for him to beat. Braun Breaker and Sheamus for the Intercontinental title. This is Sheamus's 1,000,000th opportunity at the title. Is this his last best opportunity? Will he get the title? Look, I am sure this is going to be a great, hard-hitting match, but they would be fools to take the title off of Braun here and put it onto Sheamus. So far, I've got no title switching hands. What about Gunther and Jay? Does Jay pull off the miracle? Is this No Way Out 04? Is he Eddie Guerrero? Is Gunther Brock Lesnar? Who the hell would be Goldberg in that scenario? No. Gunther retains. I'm sure we get an angle. I'm sure we get lots of angles in a lot of these matches. That's what Saturday night's main event is for, to progress things to the Royal Rumble. If anything, We just have a little bit of a break, so Gunther and Rhea don't actually have to have title matches at the Rumble. That is the point this year. That is the point this excuse me, that seems to be the point this year. That seems to be the point this time of this Saturday night's main event. What do you guys think? Any big predictions there? I don't care if these things aren't stacked. And like I said, I don't think that's a bad idea if you're not going to have a bunch of matches on the Rumble to put the Gunther match here, to put the Rhea match here. It's not a bad use of your time. And then immediately we got to go into mode, right, for how much time do we have between the Rumble and John Cena's final appearance in Toronto? So we get the Rumble, and that is on the 1st of February. Vengeance Day. And 1st. So we have exactly a month. And no PLEs in between. And then we're on the road to WrestleMania. So in terms of major shows, there's only 2 left before WrestleMania. So some of these things are going to have to fall into place. But as long as they keep, I think, tentpole and Raw with like 1 or 2 big matches that has big storyline progression, I think we're going to be fine. Saturday night's main event might as well be a SmackDown. Yeah. I'm fine with it, though, if it's just this, again, if it's, we got to figure out what these shows are going to be, because I think these shows are all going to have unique identities now. It seems to be that SmackDown has something to it, which SmackDown, I mean, I watched it Saturday morning. SmackDown is just so sleepy right now. Raw has its kind of energy. NXT has its fill that it's still trying to land with. And then the Saturday night's main event, I think they're better than like what the Battle of the Belts kind of thing was the AEW had going there for a while. But I think there's sort of these, not necessarily main event, but fully presented competitive matches, which I'm okay with that. I really am. I really am. X is a weird I need to use the site more so I can refine this a little more. It's a weird hodgepodge of inauguration, the Buckeyes winning, and occasionally something about Rob, but not much. I don't know. I don't want to say that to be rude. I don't watch NXT closely enough to make a prediction. So I don't know. I need to get NXT back into my wrestling diet a little more consistently. All right, guys, I've done about my post-Raw Broadway. Almost gone my hour. I'm going to sign off in just a minute if you guys don't have anything to me. But if you do, go ahead and get into the chat right now. So I'm thinking, I don't know about you, but I'm going to go ahead and pop on a post-show on Saturday. So like it'll, instead of Saturday night's main event, it's like Saturday night's post-show. I think that's going to be fun on Saturday night if we do that. And then the week following that, I think we'll have a Royal Rumble post show. We'll see if you guys don't get sick of me. A lot of the new viewers seem to have decent enough reception, especially from the RVD site. Things are going really, really well there. But it's been fun doing these every week, these quick recaps of Raw fresh on the Netflix. And I like that we have now this little log of us categorizing them and following them. And hopefully we can keep this streak going a lot this year. I'm kind of having a lot of fun bringing them to you guys. But guys, that is going to do it for me tonight. I'm Rob, as a part of Brass Ring Media. This has been the Nocturnal Knockout, a podcast on the One True Sport YouTube channel. I will catch you later.